everyone! Hello, selectors, and welcome back to the Life First Podcast. We're talking about the new centers in Conflated Diva. We're talking about Carnival today. So, I've got actually, weirdly, a couple different versions of Carnival. That's just mostly because Carnival's sort of this, type of L rig that has a lot of different options in it that it could go into. It's kind of wacky and a little bit weird. But there's a couple different ways that you can go with it. I basically wanted to bring you guys three different ways. So I found one from our GP that we did just recently in the US, and it got 8th place. I found another GP in Japan where another list also got 8th place, I believe. And I wanted to show that one as well as my own personal take on it. I think this just shows maybe the versatility of Carnival, being able to fit in so many different options. Basically, all of them end up being a blue-red of some sort. The third color being sort of the mix-it-up color. Let's start with this one from our most local GP in the US, the most recent one, so we can talk about that. It's this Carnival deck here. And let's talk about Carnival herself. So Carnival's a level 3 red center with the ability of getting, first off, coins. So you get 2 coins when you go into her level 3, and you get 3 coins when you're in her level 1. This is good. Basically, all of the better, quote-unquote, better decks start with 3 coins and then get 2 later down the line, at least, you know. So that allows you to do more heavier coin stuff than you could normally. Its action ability is once per turn, you can discard a card. This L-Rig gains the following. When this L-Rig attacks, choose one of the following. Either draw a card, enter charge 1, or put target Signy on your opponent's field into the trash till end of turn. Now, while drawing a card and enter charging 1 are pretty cool, I mean, being able to change out a card from your hand to an enter is pretty good. Being able to filter a card from your hand to a different card is passable, not great. Number 3 is the best one here. Putting a Signy in the opponent's field to the owner's trash allows you to do basically Gay Balg, but stapled to an L-Rig, which means that it's actually quite strong. So that's the one that you're probably going to lean more towards. Its last ability is also once per game. Make up to 2 target Signies on your opponent's field servant zeros till end of turn. That's colorless level 1s with 1000 power for what it's worth. So basically just blanks them out completely, and then you can vanish them as you will. This deck that is from the GP here is pretty strong. I played against it in my own on my own round 7. And what makes it strong is it's actually kind of more resilient than you'd expect, right? Can't Stop Pretty, and along with Madoka Clap, buys it a lot of time in terms of damage output to do some more damage output. Ultra Superheroes is just, you know, generically a good card, although in this deck you're doing the thing where you are vanishing something and then milling them, so it's just basically damage output. And this deck does lean more aggro than it does tempo or mid-range. It has some long game stuff, but really what it functions is putting out these sort of like damned if you do, damned if you don't board states. It has some combos here where all opponents get all Signy gets negative 10,000 for free with this enter, which can kill basically the entire board when you use your once per game. And it is using the strong part of using Pure Luke, which allows you to discard the card, but then the card that you discard comes out into the field. I think that's really, really important for this type of deck to maintain its sort of like what do you call it? To maintain its card advantage. And then it gives something negative 2,000 and freezes it. Which if you made something what do you call it? A servant 0, then by doing that you will also kill it because it'll have 1000 power, so it'll also be vanillaed out. Outside of that, it's got a lot of things going for it. Like, it looks kind of like a pile when you first look at it, but then there's a lot of binding agents to it. For example, Hakots in here help you filter through a lot of different things. The Phalaris plus the mill is basically the strong little re-mill package that you can do. The Diabrides just help sort of strike down enter. There's a lot of trash recursion happening in this, and a lot of deck sort of filtering that's happening. And so you have a lot of ways to actually filter to what you're looking for and what you're strong with. So I'm not surprised that it top aided. I think it's actually pretty good. I think this list, and I talked a bit more um, with the pilot for this, that this could be more refined, and it has in fact been more refined as time has gone on a little bit. Nanashi is probably the most interesting part of this because Carnival can be weak to hand disruption as well as enter disruption, and Carnival and Nanashi selection specifically actually helps alleviate that at the cost of some defensive stuff. But it does help alleviate that a bit, which is kind of a pretty cool thing here. If you want to learn more about this deck in general, we're going to be doing an interview, and we're going to be talking more about this Carnival deck as well. In the meantime, let's go ahead and check out some of these other Carnival decks. So there's this Carnival deck from Japan that also did pretty good here. And this one ends up being more of a mid-range strategy, where you're sort of using Carnival's effect to do something that's more good stuff. And you're using a Tamago to refill your hand so you can constantly go with this ability to discard something and do something. That's kind of key. Again, trying to keep your hand size up. You'll see there's even more ways to keep your hand size up. Energy Door gets more cards in hand. Ancient Echo also gets more cards in hand and is also just generically a very strong piece as well. And then you can also convert some of those cards in hand if you have extra to Mel Invisible and do a 3-stop. This deck is very strong in its Elrig deck setup on its own, and it doesn't really need much more than this to be very powerful, but it has some stuff to it. So in the end, here's sort of what it looks like. It has these low impact ways to open up lanes. So you've got a lane opener here, lane opener here. You've got another lane opener here, another lane opener here, and then you have some lane openers in sort of the what do you call it? The life burst slot. This allows you to get in just a little bit more burst damage, but it's supplemented also with some discard here. So this deck actually has 4 Monomin, 1 Bruno, 3 Paraluke, and 4 Random Drain. And this is all just sort of to help out get with this idea that mostly you're going to be gay-bogging them. The other thing that this deck functionally does a little bit better than the other deck is that it allows you to get this freeze a little better. So when you use Paraluke and you're not using the once per game, what you end up doing is freezing the opponent's Signy and then trashing another one. So you really actually can enter deny them pretty hard with this type of deck, even though this deck does have a fair amount of ways to open lanes that is Vanish, right? Another thing here is you've got the Diabride, right? The Diabride also does that. Diabride here may be a little bit more successful too, because there's just a bit more red Signies in general for this. And then it's a little bit more versatile against discard because it's using Contempora for that type of sort of get cards back to your hand. Yuzuki here as another way to sort of enter deny your opponents a little bit in the late game. Overall, a very strong deck, I think. And I could see why this type of deck would make it to the top of the GP. I've played around with a lot of different versions of sort of Energy Door, Ancient Echo, good white or good blue, red, green, usually Mel Burst, Elrigs, and some amount of just some bare bones amount of green to make that work. And it has been very strong mid-range tactics. Now, while I like this, I actually like this sort of setup with a bit of a different center Elrig. I think Carnival's a very interesting way to do it, though. I wanted to explore a more tempo kind of version of Carnival. What I personally see and get excited for when I see Carnival is this ability to just constantly deny the opponent enter. With red's enter denial as well as trashing here, and then blue's discard and freezing. So I went a little bit more in depth with that. Some things that I've done here is I wanted to bring white in instead of a different color, so that way I could also kind of keep it going with the Yukimi here. The Yukimi allows you to, again, attack something, and when it would be vanished instead, you trash it. But it also gives you card draw, and I think that's kind of important in this type of deck. You'll notice that I'm still running the 4 Diabrides. I'm still pretty red. Like there's definitely less red here than you would normally have, but what I found playing more and more with Diabride, especially with Dash Hirana, is that you don't actually need a ton of red to make Diabride work. You just need to partner your Diabride with another red Signy to make it work. So for example, if you're opening up 2 lanes in this turn, what you'll need is Diabride and another red card. Once you put that red card in the open lane so you can attack with this Celebre, for example, you're punishing them for removing the Celebre with the Diabride. It doesn't need to be much more thicker than that. Diabride also is just a really good glue piece because of this ability to discard a card, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, which means that you can filter through the things that you need. One of the reasons why I wanted to add white into the deck, though, is actually not for Yukimi at all. Like, I like Yukimi and I like Yuki. I think these are great additions to this deck, but really it's Firefly Squid. Whenever I see an Elrig say discard a card on it, I immediately want to put Firefly Squid in here. And this is a lot to do with like my past with Madoka, but this card is excellent if you can supplant it with the Elrig deck. Like, granted, there's other ways to supplant it too. We've got Monomin for sure, but like it's just much better if you can get it going with the Elrig deck. And there's actually a fair amount of ways that you've got discard in here anyways, right? You've got Monomin, you've got Diabride. So that way you actually have a fair amount of ways to discard, trigger it outside of the Elrig stuff if you need to. And again, triggering it, this has this natural built-in thing here where if you're triggering it anyways, you might as well trigger your Paraluke as well. So these are all really strong reasons to do it. I think this is a bit of a missing piece. Again, you'll notice that the key here is you're getting a card with your but you're just getting another card, so you're refilling yourself if you're discarding yourself. And then you also still randomly discard the opponent. Random discard is pretty huge. I actually lost the top 8 mostly to random discard. So it is better than you'd think, especially in longer games. I also am using Ultra Superheroes here because I like the idea of being able to vanish something and draw something. There's better, I think, pieces for this deck that just maybe don't exist yet, but drawing some extra and vanishing something still very powerful for 1 enter, so I'll still take it. Maybe not as powerful, but Can't Stop Pretty makes up for that a little bit by being actually pretty strong on its own. Were you running Yuki Yuka Pawn? I mean, the float and the clap is sort of, I think, a given, but Pawn plus Dojin allows you to just really have cards in hand, and that's something this deck really needs. And the Dojin's just a little bit of a stop on that stuff. If you wanted to play a little bit different with this deck, you probably could swap this out for Akino, and I think that's actually probably a pretty good idea too. Swapping this for Akino Rock and Akino Bye Bye allows you to have a little bit more lane opening while still, disrupting the opponent's enter. I just like this. It's a little bit cheaper, is my reasoning. But I could see with more, if I refined this more, I could see a want to going ahead and putting this as an Akino instead. There's another option too where you take out Madoka Clap and you replace it with Madoka Dub, which actually seems pretty good, and replacing this with Lion and Line Disrespect. Line Dig and Disrespect. And I think that is also a pretty fair option if you wanted to go ahead into that world as well. So that is the Carnival coin setup in a nutshell. I hope you guys like it. I think it's a very unexplored Elrig, and I think it can actually be pretty close to top tier, at least B tier, if not A tier. So go ahead and let me know what you guys think and what you guys are doing with Carnival.